Patrick.
Oh, it's good to be here. I'm excited.
Me too. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm just really looking forward to getting to know you. I've heard about you through the Unified Mindfulness path, heard wonderful things about your yoga and your coaching. I am also a yoga enthusiast, I guess. So looking forward to chatting about that and those intersections between Unified Mindfulness and yoga. But maybe we can just start with, when did you first discover mindfulness or yoga, whatever came first? What was going on in your life? What were you looking for? Or did you stumble upon it?
It's a good question. I know, I've listened to other podcasts, like, where did I start? And I think I've always had some sort of, I don't know, picture that I just loved always how things worked. How's that for ever since I was little, I just enjoyed taking things apart or just, I don't know, looking at the patterns of how they were.
Huh.
And I don't know, my neighbor was like very spiritual. She was a Christian scientist healer. And if you know that they don't use traditional medicine, that they believe in faith healing. But I grew up in New England. It's a very New England style, very quiet. But she just had a quiet presence about her that kind of influenced me. That you could tell she was somewhere. She had something more. If that resonates at all. And I went to college. I'm an engineer. I trained in engineering. And I did it. You always think, oftentimes you think engineers like, oh, they're whatever, stuck in the mud, straightforward. But engineers also the other way, that math and science are kind of like the language of nature when you really understand it that way. And it's just understanding nature and how it works. And through that, I was always interested in physics, modern physics especially. And the more you understand modern physics, the more that they kind of come back to the idea like, well, we really don't know. You can't, the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, or I don't know. When you look at a particle, if you choose to do an experiment, you choose to see a particle, the light as a particle, you'll see it as a particle. And if you choose to see it as a wave, it's a wave. And the scientists hated that, that the observer influenced reality, essentially, is what it came down to.
Yes.
And, in 1927, they had a conference with like Einstein and Madame Curie, all these, I think it was 17 Nobel laureates or future Nobel laureates were there and trying to understand this whole thing. And they basically came out of there saying, well, we just agree that we can't understand it, just accept it. And that was the end of it. And that really stuck with me. It's like, oh, so, and I read a book, The Tao of Physics. And the Dancing Woolly Masters. And they're both these parallel between physics and Eastern mysticism. And that intrigued me, that there's such a parallel, that basically 2,000, 2,500 years ago, people, instead of going to the outside of the world to look for answers, they went to the inside world. And they're just as smart 2,000 years ago. And these brilliant minds came up with stuff, but you need to take time to understand it. So I kind of got intrigued with that. And I started, a local studio had a yoga class, and it's like, well, why not? I'll go to that, and ended up getting involved and training to be a yoga teacher with Baron Baptiste to start with.
Cool.
And then kind of continued on that, and then I trained at Kripalu, where it's a beautiful center, and Kripalu also truly they're involved with Harvard and some of the other places. So they're truly trying to blend science and yoga together, Eastern mysticism together. And it kind of got into, I think it got deeper and deeper. It was a slippery path, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So a few questions, I guess. Yeah. I want to go back to this woman that was your neighbor. Yeah. I thought that was really interesting, because what it tells me is that sometimes you can communicate something just through your presence, right? So did she tell you anything, or was it just you knew there was something about her that other people didn't have? And did you?
I didn't want to dive too deep into that. It was a fascinating couple. I lived in Connecticut, in rural Connecticut, and they'd retired from New York City. And she was born in 1886. She was born. And, she was older. She'd never had kids. Her husband was a stage magician. So and she was an actress, and she just had this presence. It's hard to describe. She just had a presence that was something, and it was this beautiful home that was from an artist that, it was a studio. It was just, there was an energy there. That's all I can explain. There was a space between her words, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. That's so cool. And then how long was it between that and when you started at the yoga studio?
Oh, it was a long time.
Yeah.
It was that was when I was like 12 or something. I really, but it wasn't until I was 50 that I started to do yoga.
Oh, no way. That's amazing.
But in the meantime, I'd gone through, engineering, got my master's degree, and was still pursuing like the science side of things, but still with science, and then like kind of understanding the science and mysticism, how they work together.
That's so cool. Yeah, and I love Kripalu. My sister's a Kripalu teacher, actually. Oh, really? So I'll tell her, she probably knows you. I'll have to make that connection.
It's a magical place.
Swami
Kripalu was the one that started it. There's still an energy there. His energy is still, they have a center.
Yeah. And how did you find your life changed, whether it was when you started to do the yoga with Baron Baptiste, or was it more later on, or were there just like incremental changes that happened as you started to practice?
It's an interesting question. I started with Baron, and Baron, just as a little bit of background of Baron, his parents grew up in the 60s in San Francisco, and his parents ran a health food store in San Francisco. So you can almost imagine what his childhood was like. It was, all the great luminaries and gurus that existed then stopped and stayed at his house and taught.
Cool.
But he had taught a very powerful, he teaches power of vinyasa. So but he's also very powerful about self-inquiry and all that. And he has this program called 40 Days to Personal Revolution, where you kind of do a commitment to like every day you're going to practice yoga, you can practice meditation, you're going to practice yoga, you're going to do some inquiry work. So I started the meditation. That was my first really direct experience with it. And it's 5 minutes the first week, 10 minutes the second week, and 5 more minutes. And I got to the fourth week, and it was 20 minutes. And I had what now I understand what they classify as a Kundalini arising. That I was, sitting there, and like, I think because of the engineering skills, if you look at engineering in some ways, to solve a complex problem, you need to use the 3 skills we learn in Unified Mindfulness: concentration, clarity, and equanimity. You have to be concentrate on what it is you're planning to focus on. You need to have clarity to what all the parameters are, and equanimity because you don't understand it yet, but you have to sit quietly and accept that you don't understand it, and then insight will come and you'll finally put the pieces together.
Yes.
So I found meditation comfortable and enjoyable. And back to the terminology again, like the ION, the interest, opportunity, and necessity. For me, I came to meditation more from the interest.
Yes.
From like, oh my gosh, I got to fix my world is upside down. And that's a wonderful path. And I have nothing against that. But mine was more like, this is interesting.
Yes, that's awesome.
But when I was 20 minutes into it, like my fourth week, and I think because I kind of was used to focusing my mind for my engineering, it was like this huge adrenaline rush, but my heart wasn't racing. And I don't know, it's hard to describe. If anyone's ever experienced it, it's I don't know.
Was it an experience that you felt on the cushion as you were meditating, that like, did your body expand or something like this? And then also, did it continue on once you got off the cushion?
Oh yeah. Yes to both. Yes, it was like, what was that? I mean, it wasn't sometimes I describe it like, in meditation in general, sometimes it's like that optical illusion, where is it 2 faces or is it a vase? And all of a sudden the world changed from like 2 faces and I saw a vase.
Yes.
Things shifted in a significant pattern. It wasn't long. It probably was like honestly, probably like 30 seconds that this experience was, but it never left me.
Yeah.
From that day on, that was 18 years ago, I've gotten up early to meditate every day, and with never any I have to meditate. It's just I wanted to.
Yeah, it's amazing how, because it's almost, I've had a similar experience that I can talk about. I was on a Vipassana retreat. So it was a 10-day long retreat, learning to meditate, to stay with the breath. And for a while, it seems very kind of mundane, right? Like I had to focus on just the space beneath the nostrils. And I was like, no, but I have all these things that I want to solve. I want to think about all these things. And they're like, just go to the nostril. I'm like, really? Like, I didn't fully trust it, but I just did what they said. And then by day, and then we moved into more body scanning, the Vipassana. But by day maybe 6, I had this tiny moment, may not even have been a second,
Yes.
where I wasn't even meditating on time. I was just walking. I looked at a tree, and everything became bright. And I was the tree. Like, I told my kids, and they laughed because they're like, "You're a tree." I'm like, I would like the same identity. Like, I am Paula. I was the tree. So that's the only way I can explain to people. But what's interesting that it's like there's an opening that happens, right? And that's where I think as teachers we need to. I'm curious what you think about this, but it's interesting to try to understand how it is in the particular life of the student that they might just have a little opening, so they see, oh, not that this isn't real, like it's real, but it like goes way deeper. There's like all this other space that's available. And then it's just a matter of remembering, right? That this is true, but then that's also true, right? But it's such a gift when it happens. Yeah.
Yeah. How you describe it and how you smile on your face, I can tell it was, it shifts you. I go back to that. For me, I just explain it with that you see that the vases all of a sudden become the faces, or the faces become the vase. It's like, oh, the whole world is different.
Yeah. I like that example too, because both are true.
Yes.
Right. It's not like that's real. Because I went through this phase where I was like, oh, that's the real thing. And then you try to get back there and you're on the wrong, like you need to come back from that. It's all real. It's like the layers, right?
Yes. In Shinzen's book, The Science of Enlightenment, he has a picture. It shows like consciousness, and then there's like the subconscious, and then there's enlightenment down below. Like there's 3 levels.
Right.
And
yes.
And that's why I'm sometimes even hesitant to talk about that experience, because you don't want people, this is where you need to be. Oh, you're better. It's not you're a better meditator, worse meditator. It's just something that happens along the way when you meditate. Sometimes things happen when you get to the deeper, when you quiet your mind, stuff happens.
Yes.
And you can't get attached to them either, because then that's a hindrance to actually getting to the next level.
Yeah, it's so true. So then you continued the morning meditation since that point. And how do you find the relationship between your yoga practice, like your yoga asana practice, I guess, movement or posture practice, versus the meditation? Do you do both every day, or how do they work together for you?
It's a good question. I meditate every day. I mean, that's just actually a non-negotiable. It's funny. I meditate every day, but every so often I let myself not meditate because I don't want to have pride and like, I meditate every day. It's like, you know what? If I'm going to sit and meditate just because I don't want to lose, a streak, if you want to call it, that's wrong too. It's like I have to let that go. I meditate every morning. Like I say, ever since I had a Kundalini experience, I've woken up early. It's hard to describe. I've woken up early, and it's just there's a hole I fill with the meditation. So half an hour, 40 minutes every day, I just do a sit. Any
particular technique, or it changes over time?
That's going to be probably the conversation for the rest. It's because and again, I'm excited to talk to you about this, because you've also gone in the yoga path, and I find that it's interesting in yoga. They're very much a physical asanas. I went through 2 200-hour trainings and 2 400-hour trainings. I've also at Kripalu did the Ayurveda training. I'm an Ayurvedic Health Counselor.
Great.
So there's all these different ways, but in the yoga world, it seems like, typical yoga studio in America, it really don't. I mean, meditation is kind of like a secondary. It's mostly the
Yes.
asana, the physical postures. But then when I get to the meditation world, it's almost all like the meditation and almost no physicality. And
Yes.
maybe you can correct me. I don't want to misrepresent. Oftentimes, like in the meditation, in the Buddhist, like a Zen, it's like the body's not, you're fighting it, but it's like it's something that you have to work with, that you ignore, sort of, or you have to transcend.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the yoga world, it's you use it, you enjoy it, you breathe into it, you know you use that to pull your mind out of its patterns.
Yes, I have found the same. That's what I do, why I do both. Because with the I started also with mostly meditation, although I did do a little bit of yoga because I did the mindfulness based stress reduction, the 8-week course. So he
Mm-hmm.
has a couple yoga sessions in there. But then I went on to Vipassana. So I would sit in meditation for long periods. But yes, there was an experience of you could um, get outside your body in a way, like connect with that bigger picture. But then I would be back, right?
Yeah.
So I remember coming back from a 10-day retreat and being like, oh no, like I have this and I have to carry it, and it's sad and it's heavy. And so I found that the yoga helped me to connect with the more human aspects of me, the body and its limitations. And interestingly, what I've discovered is a lot of the emotional challenges that I've had in my past are weirdly in the body too.
Yeah, 100%. Yes, 100%. Yes, Van der Kolk, the body keeps score.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes. Yeah. So do you practice then your yoga like some days a week or still most days,
pretty
or
much. I'd
your
say
postures?
probably 4 to 5 days a week. I do my own practice probably 3 days a week, and maybe go to a studio and take from someone else for 2 days a week. And I teach yoga, I don't know, 5 or 6 classes a week. I
Yeah.
teach.
Wow. It's quite a bit. Are you doing
Um,
this full time now, or you're still doing your engineering?
no, and serendipity. When I was 60, I was teaching at a studio, and the owner asked me, "Do you want to, buy the studio? I'm moving to Philadelphia." And it's like, I'm got this nice engineering job, and then 2 months later, they reorganized my company and gave me a really nice severance package, and it's like, well, here I am,
Wow.
60 years old. It's like, you really want to start a new career somewhere else? Like, no, I bought the studio, and I kind of went full time to do that, and then 3 years later, we decided to move here to Pittsburgh, and then I just teach at a studio. So I'm retired, and I do what I want now.
That's so beautiful. That's great.
The other thing that I've done that I'd like to share with you, it's serendipity. I truly believe that if you just leave yourself open, if you leave a space open for things, things come.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to make them come, then you're trying kind of influences what the outcome is. How's that for a
Yeah.
so through pure serendipity? I was here. I had time. I was teaching, but I had free time to do other things if I wanted. Through serendipity, I was asked to help do some intervention for, like, they were doing a trial at Carnegie Mellon University, and for mindfulness, for like they're doing acceptance, and see how that would work for incoming freshmen.
Hmm.
So I got involved at the lab at CMU, Carnegie Mellon, and that's where David Cresswell is. It's his lab, David Cresswell, and if you know him at all,
No.
he works. He actually does presentations with Shinzen. So he and Shinzen are like collaborators on meditation and mindfulness. So
Wow.
he's well known in the meditation and mindfulness field. He does straight up hard science, like randomly controlled studies with active controls. And so anyway, I've been involved in that for the last 4 years. I've been involved at his lab doing research now, and it's that's how I got introduced to was through David
Okay.
Cresswell, because he was using Unified Mindfulness to develop. I was helping. They were developing an app, and they're also using that app. They're using that app with some variations to test out, like concentration and clarity, which in some ways would be, in some Buddhist traditions, that's, open awareness or focused attention. But then they also did it with equanimity, the acceptance part, and to see what the variation, what the results were. So he's done all sorts of cool stuff. So I'm involved in like actually doing hard science using my engineering skills and the meditation and the yoga. It's kind of coming together.
Isn't that so cool?
Yeah.
I love what you said about not forcing things.
Yes.
I think for a lot of people who are used to the corporate world or, just a more linear career where you're supposed to work towards a particular goal in the future and always like kind of manage everything to go to that goal, myself included, this idea of being open is very new and uncomfortable. But isn't that interesting that sometimes when we open to new possibilities, we don't even know what might arise, right? Did you find you were always able to stay open, or did you work on that, like staying more open to what would unfold?
Interesting. Yes. Trying to think how deep to dive in. I'll dive into physics just for a teeny bit because that's my background.
Sure.
And that's, again, another thing. As soon as I got introduced to Unified Mindfulness, it's like, oh, Shinzen's totally into math and science also.
Yes,
so
yes.
It's like, oh, here's someone that I can totally, there's no, anything that science discovers, there's no disparity between that and the traditional wisdom, except maybe sometimes the traditional wisdom, if you look at it, it's, a guru had it or whatever, and then it got handed down a number of times before somebody wrote it in a different language and it finally got translated into. So the kernel still matches, but sometimes the external part of it's not quite there. That makes sense.
Yes.
Anyway, back to possibility in physics and how the physicists decide the real world. It's the wave equation that kind of takes everything that's there and puts it together. But the wave equation contains a little kernel, like in the math part of it, it contains an imaginary number, the square root of -1, which is an imaginary number. It doesn't exist in reality. But in order to describe reality, the possibilities, you have to use this imaginary number to describe everything that's possible.
Yes.
And then when you start to look at probabilities, you square that, you square some of the terms in there. And when you do that, then the imaginary number disappears. And now these are the probabilities.
Okay.
And then from probabilities, then when you choose a path, like back to Schrodinger's cat or whatever, it's both until you open the box, it's then it becomes reality.
Okay. So then you're open to all
possibilities.
All possibilities.
So there's possibilities. And even in real hardcore physics terms, there's imaginary. There's like, it's just kind of imagination in some ways. But they're there. And then they become more probable when you start to focus on them and start to pay attention. And then when you finally choose something, then it becomes reality.
Okay. And how does that work in terms of not getting too attached though? So, because for you, I love about your story is like, you didn't say, okay, I'm going to become a yoga teacher and I'm going to work really hard to transition my career here. Yeah. It just kind of happened. And then same with like the science thing. But then I guess it's like noticing when the possibility arises and then being like, yes, that feels like it might work. Or how does that go?
That's a good question. I think you're right on the crux. And I listened to your podcast, and you've gone through kind of that same transition. Like, in order to accomplish things, you need to be focused.
Yes.
But if you're so focused and the direction's not right, then it causes stress. Which, maybe again, I'm not really as well versed in the Buddhist traditions, more in the Vedic traditions. But it's just that idea that, if you want to call it dharma, if you're not quiet enough and understand where you're at, I don't know. I heard a saying once, which I really said, hold your beliefs lightly.
Yes. I like that, but still have them, right? Like, so I'll give an example of like where I am right now. Like, so I have my government job and I have my little yoga mindfulness thing that I'm I'm building out. And then I'm going to have like these 6 months off. I have this possibility. So before, I think I would have made a plan like, okay, in these 6 months, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But now it's like, oh, I'm going to see how it goes, but still move in the direction of, I guess it's like you said, your dharma, like a deeper calling. Like, what do I love? I do Ashtanga yoga, which is very physical and very like structured. Yeah. And I've quit in the past to do yoga therapy. I'm a yoga therapist too. So, I think this is a good example. So the Ashtanga system is very structured. And very linear. So it appears as if you're working to the next pose and you need to be like moving forward to the next pose. So people become, and myself included, when I started, very goal oriented. But then you hit this place where there was this pose, I just couldn't do it. And it was like, it wasn't a matter of trying harder. Mm-hmm. It's just that my body wasn't able to do that pose. And then after a while of getting really frustrated, I said, forget it. Like, I'm just not going to do the whole thing anymore. And I went in a different direction. I learned yoga therapy. But then I was during the pandemic, actually, I felt there was something about like the dynamism and of the community that I loved. And I said, can I do the same thing? Knowing that in my personality, I'll still want to do, whether it's that pose or the next pose, but explore it in a different way. And I had one teacher tell me when I was like, well, why should I do that? Why should I try so hard to do it? And she said, you do it because you love it. You do it to just show up every day and just be like, I wonder what's going to happen. And I love that. And I think that it applies to me now. That's how I'm doing both my yoga practice, which I'm doing the linear Ashtanga thing, but I do it in a more playful way. And I try to be less attached to whether I get the pose or not. The pose, it doesn't really matter. We're all going to lose all the poses anyway. And same with life. It's like, instead of saying, well, I'm not going to go for it because that's a danger too. It's like, well, I'm not going to go for it because I'm just waiting to see what happens. I'm going to just wait around and the right thing will come. It's missing something for me. It's like, I need to move towards the thing that I feel like I love it. And then maybe it'll come a point where it'll be like, oh, I don't love this anymore. Right. I don't know.
You described it perfectly. And that's the equanimity is kind of that same thing. Like, if you're totally equanimous and people say, well, then you don't care. And you don't care. It is, you care, but you don't, back to maybe in the yamas and the niyamas, it's aparigraha, the non-grasping.
Yes. Tell us more about that. That's so interesting.
I did some. You have one. It's like basically you have your hand open. You hold more things in it. So you're just having. You're holding it in your hand. But if you close your fist and you have to have it. You have it. It's just there's a difference. If you leave your hand open, you can have more things in it. Some things might slide off, but there's still more things in your hand.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And that aparigraha is that grasping. If you grasp, you don't hold what you have. You hold on so tightly. Your forearm gets tired. You get worn out. And if you open your hand and trust that things will fill it, maybe that's what's happened to me my whole life. It's just things. If you hold your hand open, enjoy. I know I live by little sayings, but somebody said, "Don't worry about making the right choice. Worry about making your choice right."
Ah, I love that. Yeah. And the image that came to mind with the hand is also like a little bird, right? Like it might land in your hand, but if you were to squish it wouldn't last very long. But then with leaving the hand open, there's like a tenderness to it because it will fly away, right? Like at some point it might go.
And you can hold more subtle things and more gentle and more ethereal, more special things. Mm-hmm. If you squeeze them, you squeeze the life out of something, maybe.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a good, Your analogy is a bird. You kind of amplified what I said. I really like that.
Awesome. And then tell us about, so you did the Unified Mindfulness. You went all the way, right? Like you did the compass training.
It's funny. You actually used two of my other we had a little study group of 5 of us, and two of the other people you've interviewed are also in my study group.
Cool.
Kristen and Megan are both in my study group.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a special time.
Tell me about that compass experience. How, what do you learn? How did it change you or your teaching?
It first of all, the system is just, it's such an well designed. It's like a container to hold everything else in. It sounds like you've had a lot of different paths you've taken, and the just kind of gives you a structure, the concentration, clarity, and equanimity. If you trust that those 3 skills are what you work with, then everything else is kind of secondary.
Yes.
I think that's what I learned. And I also learned, it's interesting because they kind of gone with the happiness gone back and not back and forth, but now they've shifted to be, instead of being of service, to be connected, the connections. And I found, through the working with listening to people's stories and doing checks, and you can only learn so much about yourself. You can do self-inquiry, but when you're in, like, even the conversation we're having today, when you have this deeper conversation with other people, it's like we all have blind spots. And if you talk to someone else and you kind of see how they're experiencing the world with a very deep conversation, then you kind of say, am I experiencing that? I just don't see it, or is that just not my reality? It's just going to help you grow with awareness of yourself. I think that's what I learned from was how everyone's so different, but we're all kind of headed to, there's that deep internal, whatever you want to call it, Sanskrit Atma, or something we all have uniform. Just one last quote. It was Ramana Maharshi. He was like acknowledged as like one of the most enlightened beings of the last century in India, and he didn't really have a lot of following because he never taught. It wasn't his path. He said, you come to me, ask me questions, I'll give you answers. But somebody asked him, how do you treat others? And he said, there are no others. That he was that deep. And I think that's kind of unified mindfulness helped me, put a framework that everyone's experiencing the same things if we use those 3 tools. Maybe I'm rambling a little bit, but
no, it's so powerful. And I think it's such an important part of practice, actually, like thinking about our listeners and people who might be starting out. Like, we've been doing this for a long time, but if we think back to when we started, it feels super strange, right? Like, because it's so countercultural. Everybody is telling you, they're so busy and they have a million things to do. And then here we're just like sitting, or we're like moving in our mats without again, it's not really goal oriented. It's taking space to do something, to look within. Again, that's also countercultural, that it's not about fixing things outside, it's in. But then the community, so connecting with other people that are doing a similar thing, makes you feel a little bit less crazy. Like, that we're actually not crazy. Yeah. Like, this is a good thing to be doing, right? And we learn from others. Yeah.
And it makes you, like, even this podcast, I was thinking, it's like, it kind of not forces, but allows you to put things in words. You kind of have half-formed ideas. And when you talk to someone else, you hear someone else say things, you take something that's kind of unformed, back to that analogy I use of possibilities, probabilities, and reality, that you're kind of, if you live in the possibilities and probabilities realm, which is powerful, but when you work with another person, it's you have reality, but then also you can kind of get close enough with them. You can kind of share possibilities and probabilities too. And it's just you're not in the everyday world with them anymore. You're kind of in a special place together.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. Do you want to tell us a bit about what you're doing now? Are you still teaching at your studio? You mentioned that you're doing the science research. Anything that you're offering that you wanted to share with people?
That's a good question. And maybe, who knows what in fact, leaving things open for space. I'd say my yoga teaching has changed significantly since I finished Unified Mindfulness.
Okay.
And with the science too. At CMU, Carnegie Mellon, what I'm involved with more actively right now is how respiration changes with meditation.
Okay. Do you want to just say that one more time? It just cut out a little bit. from
I'm sorry.
the.
Respiration at CMU. I'm doing part of one of one of the more active research projects I'm working on is looking how respiration changes, the dynamics of respiration change when you meditate. And maybe using that as we're trying to apply science to meditation, but that's a challenge with science by its very nature. You take things apart in order to test them. You need to take everything apart. And I think it was Albert Einstein said that, you want to understand how a cat, you can take it all apart and look at all the pieces, but what you end up with is a dead cat.
Yeah, so true.
So it's a challenge to do that. But when I'm doing a lot of research now in breath work, respiration, and the dynamics, and that's something that in unified mindfulness, it's a path you can take, but it's not really emphasized. And in some ways, I think it's not a reaction, but a little bit of that, because so many meditative traditions are like, oh, focus on your breath. And a lot of people struggle with their breath. So it's instead of saying, oh, you have to do breath if you do unified mindfulness, it's like, you don't. You can do other things, but I think what I'm finding is for myself that breath is really, really important.
Yes.
All the pranayama. So anyway, I'm incorporating more of the pranayama, but not to do it in a heavy-handed way, because I think that's where people struggle. It's like you have to inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold, and people, for many, many people, doesn't work. So I'm exploring like how to weave more pranayama and breath awareness. If you're a yoga teacher into yoga, I'm leading classes now with you move from vinyasa. It means you flow from pose to pose. So if I tell you my ultimate dream right now would be to create. I'm thinking of calling it unified yoga.
Okay, cool.
Because I have unified mindfulness and it's focused on the meditation part, but I have to take all the tools we learned in unified mindfulness and weave it together into a yoga class.
I love this. I'm happy to help. We should work on this together. Because two things that I'm really interested in with the yoga therapy, very much a breath focused system, because through your breath, you can influence the mind, right? And that's, again, something not so covered in unified mindfulness, but if you want to energize your system, inhale and hold after the exhale. If you want to calm your system, exhale. But then also the somatic experiencing and working with traumas that are held in the body, and how that the breath combined with noticing other safer places in the body that are feeling good, like all of that, it's such a complement to the meditation. So I think that's amazing that you're doing that. Yeah. And I'm happy to stay in touch.
Seriously, I'm serious. I touch possibilities, but sometimes it's like, I need somebody to kick me along and say, let's do something. But I really do believe that, like, sometimes if you focus exclusively on breath, it might get overwhelming for some people.
Totally.
But if like say in a vinyasa, like they call it, sun A or sun B, you're moving with your breath, and it's different. It's you're smiling. I can tell. It's like that's why you love Ashtanga, because it has a set rhythm of what you're doing, and you're moving with a pattern that you can disengage your mind from its ruminations and come into a place.
Yeah. And one person I want to bring into this conversation, because I've been reading her book lately, Vanda Scaravelli. I don't know if you've heard of her.
No.
She was an Italian teacher. She was a student of, her family had a lot of money. So they would have all the big teachers in the 70s come to her house in Switzerland. So she learned from Iyengar and I think Patabi Joyce as well, and Desikachar.
Oh, wow.
So they would come and they would teach her, but then she sent them all away and she studied herself in her living room. And she came to realize that there were 3 elements in every pose, which were gravity. But that gravity, if you go down, then you also come up. And she used all these, she explores in the book, like in nature, all these things. Like if you see Niagara Falls, it falls, but then there's like the steam that comes up. Or when the birds land, they also open their wings. So there's like gravity actually pulls you both ways. And breath, and then this wave-like motion that happens in the spine. So that's, I think, an interesting way to bring in the breath and the movement and the meditation, because you need to pay attention to all these things, right? So very cool.
Skills. And then if you look at the, now you're mentioning, it remind me, that's part of it also is like, in the Unified Mindfulness, you get into the, appreciate, well, I'm brain freeze right now, but basically when you get into the flow and expansion and contraction.
Yes.
I mean, that's really, you think about like you do a warrior one, you're expanding out, and then you come down into a chaturanga, you're kind of contracting in. It's that you're if you start to use cues that bring awareness to that fact that there's this feeling of expansion and contraction and effort and ease and all the ways that, the flow.
Yes.
And I think also, then you can add the science behind it too. Studying respiration, and they're showing that if your exhales activate the parasympathetic, your inhales activate the sympathetic, and that it's powerful to have this balance between the two.
Yes.
And the ability to be kind of conversation earlier. Like sometimes you need to put effort in, sometimes you need to take effort out.
Yeah.
And to have the skill to do both and to kind of weave that into the practice, to have a very effortful part and then have a relaxing part and an effortful part and then a neutralizing part.
Beautiful.
I think that's what I love to do, is kind of weave all the wisdom from current science. You get me excited on stuff, but I don't know where you feel, but in some ways the yoga world, you talk to like Iyengar and Pattabhi Joy, they're all passed away.
Yeah.
There's really no center to yoga anymore. There's no, who would I turn to say this is the person that really carries on a deep lineage or has a deep.
Yeah, it's true. And there's too many little clans, right? Like you could go see Sharat, which is Pattabhi Joy's son in Mysore. And then there's the yoga therapy studio in India too. But they're all like little groups. It would be nice to, bring everybody together somehow.
And so many of them are, I don't know, based on having to make a living at it. So there, in some ways, there's not the essence of just being. They're an essence of creating something.
Yeah,
I understand that goes back to you. Sometimes you need to do that too. In order to make a living or like to make it successful enough that it's accessible to people. That's part of the process.
Yeah.
But sometimes people lose themselves in that, and then it's like they judge themselves like, "Oh, look, I have, this or that." Going back to Ramana Maharshi, he didn't care. It's like, people come to me. Thankfully, people recorded the questions and answers because otherwise, we wouldn't know him.
Yeah, I love that, and for all of us to remember that it ties back together to the woman you met, that at the end of the day, our practice will influence others, not because we do all these courses or we, get all these certificates, but just through our presence, and that's what we offer. So
people are hungry for that. I mean, that's they say that the largest group in the religious group in the country right now are the nuns, but NONEs, because my kids, many just to have it kind of turned off by the organized religions. But every culture has created a religion. There's a deep need for spirituality and a deeper connection. So I think what we're working with here, just the idea of exploring that. And I think the physical part, the meditation's magical. And I think weaving that in with the physical is just another tool to use to help people that maybe somebody said, meet people where they're at. And if somebody's like, I'm here to, kick my butt and get flexible, well, meet them there.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I was like, oh, maybe I'll sneak a little bit of mindfulness in.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But then other people, they're ready to go to the deep end, or they need the mindfulness in order to, like back to the ion, they need it for a necessity. Like now they have serious things that they need to work through that they kind of let go of.
Yeah, for sure. And is there a favorite micro hit that we could offer maybe to people that are feeling stressed and they don't have time for all of this? They don't have time to take a training, but is there a little micro hit that you could lead us through? Maybe your favorite one that people could do in their commute to work or wherever they are?
I can if you're up for that.
Sure, let's do it.
It's the simplest. It's the breath. But the breath, but not being forced with the breath. So just lengthen up through your spine and just allow your shoulders to soften. You don't even need to close your eyes, but just that. It's just an inhale, like this gentle inhale. And followed by a gentle exhale. And right away followed by a gentle inhale. Followed by an exhale. Just lose yourself in the rhythm of the breath coming in and the breath coming out. And as you continue that, there's just a sense of flow and rhythm, that we have a deep inner awareness of ourselves. Unified mindfulness, we talk about content versus contour. If you let the contents drop away, all the things, and just feel the contour. Maybe you don't even see what the contour is, but it's just this motion. It's the contour of your life and moving. Nothing to change, nothing to fix. And then to finish this little micro hit, take an inhale. Let a teeny bit of air out, and then take a deeper inhale. Open your mouth and let it go.
So beautiful. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Yeah. It's truly been a joy to talk to you. It's a kindred spirit.
Yes, for sure. I'm sure this will not be the last.
Yeah. I'm excited. I think this unified yoga could be it's a possibility.
For sure, it's a possibility. I love it.
I think that's the magic of unified mindfulness. There's just so many different paths you can take. And I think that's back to you asked me about the compass. You're just realizing these 40 different standard techniques, and each one of them you can, modify and make it a special technique. It's just, there's so many possibilities. And what even the name of your what you guys are working with, tailored, it's everyone's in a different spot. Whether you need to go through the physicality or the breath or deep focus or long meditation retreat, they're all useful.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Patrick. Yeah. Any final thoughts you wanted to share?
Just thinking, I guess the final thought, if I were to have one, is just, I studied with the Swami once, and he had a saying which I really stuck with me. He said, you don't have to believe, but you have to suspend your disbelief. Pick something that draws you to it or what just intrigues you with that intuition, and just suspend your disbelief a little bit, suspend the world and maybe dance more in the possibilities. And things happen.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Patrick.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Take care.
Talk soon.